All right, folks, welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It's called DM Radio. Yours truly, Eric Kavanagh here. And I'm very excited. We're on a streak here, folks. I've done two interviews in a row about authors of books about AI. And let's go to number three. We've got Sharon Gai on the call today. That's Gai, if you want to look her up on LinkedIn or on Amazon. And she has a new book out as well about how to future proof yourself against AI. And of course, our TV show is called Future Proof. This is Kismet, as they say. So, Sharon, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for your time today. So, tell us about your book, Doing More with Less and Future Proofing Yourself from AI.
Thanks, Eric, for having me on.
Yeah.
If you look at the cover, there's a bee on the cover, and you might think, what the heck does a bee have anything related to AI by any means? But that's part of how I start off, which is um, you know, so we have, the BC age and the AD age, which is the before Christ and after Christ.
Mm-hmm.
I call 2022 the before AI year and the after AI year. And a lot of things are changing. But I think the way that we approach work has not changed or needs to change. So before AI, I think a lot of us were busy bees. We're pollinating here and going over here and going to this meeting and writing notes for that one and compiling things and going through spreadsheets and building PowerPoints. And a lot of that work is busy work. I mean, there's a reason why Sunday evenings were groaning before going to work Monday morning. And then there's a reason why Friday afternoons, it's like, yeah, like my weekend's about to start. I think so much of the drudgery that we have in our normal corporate work lives doesn't have to be so drudging.
Hmm.
And I think the post AI world is where we can turn these bees into beekeepers. And so that's kind of the
Hmm.
premise of the book is to help you to go from a busy bee in where you're mired with all of that remote or rote work into a beekeeper where you're leveraging tools or AI systems or AI agents now and in more in the future to outsource a lot of that work. So there's a framework in the book that asks every reader to examine their role that they have and to cut it up into a series of tasks and to do this task organization exercise. What are my tasks that are very rote and mechanical? What are my tasks that are very, very human, very, very messy, very ambiguous? It's a kind of a self-reflection exercise that I think every knowledge worker should do, but we haven't done that because in before 2022 and even the past couple of years, we kind of just, every new tool that comes out, shiny new object, let me go try it, or every new model that comes out, it's like a new thing that I have to chase, but we never really examined what the heck am I spending my 8 hours a day doing?
Mm-hmm.
And examining where should my human hours go. So that's the premise of the book. It's a alarm or a calling for people to start to think about their work differently.
I think that's brilliant. I love the busy bee versus the beekeeper. And of course, you reminded me of the very funny Eddie Izzard, the comedian, who does a whole bit on that. Have you seen that? I want to be a
No,
beekeeper.
no, but I
I
should.
want to keep bees. Don't want them to get away. He talks all about being a beekeeper. He's a very, very, very funny guy. He's a transvestite. He goes, transvestites, fancy girls, so we're not, he's not a tranny. That's like before the whole change, the whole transition of transition, basically. That's where his joke
Well,
came from. But look him up, Eddie Izzard. He has the whole
I
thing on
will.
bees, on beekeepers. But this is fascinating. I mean, you've hit the nail on the head here about the massive nature of this disruption because it is really, really significant. I mean, the fact that all of a sudden we have engines that can spit out all this text, all this prose that sounds very convincing, even when it's wrong sometimes, is just remarkable. And you talk about disruption. I mean, I keep reminding people that what we're seeing in terms of marketing is outrageously disruptive because for the last 20 years, trillions of dollars went from marketers to Google buying AdWords so that their links would show up in the keyword searches on Google because that's how everyone found stuff online was through Google. Like, yes, there's Ask Jeeves, there's Yahoo, there are other places, but oh my God, the market dominance was clearly Google, and now the market dominance is clearly ChatGPT. And Google is really suffering as a result of this. All inbound marketing is suffering because now I don't have to click on links to get to an answer. I just get the answer in prose from ChatGPT. Well, that is a monstrous change. So, to your point, all of a sudden we all have to figure out, all right, well, how am I going to leverage this new tool to solve real world challenges in my business life? And then what am I going to be doing with the rest of my time? And that's an open question depending upon who you are, right? And that's what the framework is designed to help you figure out in your book. Is that right?
Yeah, and even on the Google point, I think, that's the way the internet economy ran. Like it was powered through ads, and
Right.
that's what gave way to all of the sort of other startups or other companies that danced around Google, because it created that ecosystem. And so in this new way of searching for things, I think so there's a term now called AEO, or answer engine optimization, or generative engine optimization. A lot of
Hmm.
companies are spending money to figure that out, which is, how do I show up if I run a business? How do I show up in an answer engine that when my prospective customer is asking a question that's remotely related to a goods or service that I provide, how do I show up there? And
Hmm.
that is an entirely different way of running the internet and operating in the internet, which is findability. A part that there's a part of the book that I write about, which is in the future, I think a lot of companies are going to be starting to build for the bot instead of build for the human,
Hmm.
because I mean, even right now with what's happening with the Claude bot stuff, like the open Claude things, is I'm one person, but I have several different AI agents or several different bots that's working for me. And so those are my bees, and I'm unleashing the bees. And I feel like your comedian would have a field day with like coming up with his joke 2.0,
Right.
which is the bees are running amok.
Right.
All over the internet, pollinating this website and that website and getting different answers. And they're all ultimately working for me, which is the beekeeper. And how do we like what does that new world look like from a business standpoint? And then how does that roll down to me as a person that works for that company? I
Right.
think it's a lot. It's going to be a lot of new business models that's going to come out of this.
I think you're right. And I think that the job apocalypse predictions are a little bit overplayed. But then the media, as I try to point out to people, the mass media in particular is not incentivized to share calming, rational information. The mass media is incentivized to share scary, divisive information because that's what gets people freaked out and watching their TVs, like COVID when all that was going on. And you had the governor of New York every day and his SWAT team up there giving you the latest, which wasn't much, quite frankly. It was
Hmm.
just, some commentary on what was happening. But so we have to watch out for that because we expect news from the media, but really it's more entertainment and it is inherently divisive because that's what gets the money coming their way. So, I mean, this is one big thing that's happening here, and media is in big trouble too. Like, think of organic web traffic that has now collapsed because the bots are doing all the searching. When you go to ChatGPT and you ask a question and the answer is not in the model, that's when it searches the web and it shows you, okay, searching the web, and you get the icons of the different places it's going. And then it injects little snippets from that into the model, and then out comes your answer. Well, again, it's not human beings going to those sites anymore. So what I was just talking to my buddy Mark Madsen, and he was talking about Dave Kellogg, who used to be the CEO of MarkLogic, and then he was in a couple other Alation, I think, a couple other places, and he's got an article now that says nothing works anymore. Like all these old ways of doing things are just faltering now because the behavioral shift is so dramatic. I mean, it's really remarkable how things have changed. And to your point, GEO, generative engine optimization, we've got some theories about that too. And I think the good news is that SEO, if you really think about it, it was always a scam, right? Like when people were doing their SEO, they were trying to trick the algorithm instead of playing into the algorithm. And now with GEO, my theory is that video has a lot stronger of a play, in part because video is very real and video has a lot of richness to it that allows you to ascertain authenticity more easily than you can with just text, for example. Now, I don't know if this is happening yet, but my theory, and I'll show you later on our little use case that we discovered. My theory is that text is we all think text is very rich, and it is only because we have so much context in our brains. That's why we can have a communication here. But if it's in writing, like on social media, that's also why people can get so upset because you can't infer tone. You don't know if I'm joking or if I'm serious or I'm just asking a question. You presume that, oh, this is combative, and that's why you have so much conflagration online. But I think what's interesting is that with all this video content now, and this is why you have Read AI and Fireflies and all these other add-ons. Gong was the first big one that can actually ascertain sentiment and say, "Hey, wait a minute, you're losing this sale now. Focus on something else." That's powerful stuff, and that's why I think video is so prominent on LinkedIn now and other places. But what are your thoughts about that?
I think video will just continue to increase because we're like goldfish now. We have bad memory. We have no attention span. Everyone has ADHD. Like a
Right.
lot of our brains are hot wired for good, interesting content. I mean, that's why we were saying earlier, like, yeah, like during COVID, it was all of that fear mongering headline because that's what grabs attention.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's like a moving dart on your screen is going to grab your attention.
Right.
So, yeah, so as a business, if you're picking between spending a lot of money creating images, spending a lot of money writing text, copy, or spending a lot of money creating video, yeah, you probably want to spend money creating video because this is what's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I come from the e-commerce retail space. I used to work at Alibaba,
Oh,
and
wow.
in 2017 was the year that when we sell a product on on Alibaba, which and then Ali held the sort of Amazon of China, so it was a B2C marketplace. We would tell all of our merchants to write this very elaborate product detail page. This is your item, this is what it's used for. Like, don't just write a couple of lines. I really go at length, building up almost like an essay per
Hmm.
SKU you're selling. In 2017, there was a lot of push on better images. So if a, mug that you're selling is on white background versus if it's held by a model of some sort with a certain background, that's going to have higher click through.
Hmm.
So then a lot of investment went into the image part. And then in 2018 was the big pivot into video. So instead of having this mug just shown as a still image, it was
Mm-hmm.
encouraged that you shoot a video for it, whether it was, being used on a counter, in a certain type of living room, or that there's like water being poured into it, some sort of moving thing, because that's ultimately what attracted attention.
Hmm.
And the
Wow.
next iteration of that China went into in terms of selling things and grabbing attention is streaming. So now that's like the 4.0, which is okay, so now you have this moving video, which is cool. And it's no longer cool when everyone's products are moving videos because now the baseline is just
Mm-hmm.
you're like just as competitive. The next step up is when you're showcasing this in a live setting. So that's when live streaming really took off.
Hmm.
Where, now it's like an actual host literally drinking from this mug.
Right.
And,
That's
like, oh,
right.
how does it hold in my hand? It's really heavy. Or, it's like this certain shape and it goes with a certain the background that I'm displaying. So that it's like it does feel like a moving target because everyone's attention span just gets shorter and shorter. And
Right.
so to really grab it, you do need to do something different. So right now, I think, if you're an average business selling whatever you're selling and you want to exist on the internet or make a statement on the internet, it is video.
Hmm.
Um, from a e-commerce perspective, and we're already seeing it happen in the US at least, where live streaming will or live streaming is seen as the next sort of thing to do,
Hmm.
as the next step when everyone else has occupied that video space.
Right. Well, what's interesting is what goes around comes around, right? So linear TV, and I was joking that we have a TV show called Future Proof. So I love the subtitle of your book. Um, with TV, it was linear programming. So back in the day, you had to be there at 7 p.m. when your favorite show came on, and everyone like kind of built around this, and it just became normal to do that. And then we had DVDs come along. Well, first VHSs and then DVDs. Okay, now I can actually capture and watch it later. So that kind of straightened it out a little bit. Then the internet comes along and you can watch anything anytime. And I remember I was always advocating, and in fact, for DM radio for years, it was always 3 o'clock Eastern on Thursdays because I wanted that same bat time, same bat channel feeling, right? And we actually got walk up traffic because of that. So there are still aspects of the broadcast world that make sense today, even though we can watch it whenever. That's not that's no longer a constraint. Well, constraints can be good in some ways, right? So I think the live streaming stuff is taken off now because that's interesting and it gets to the point of fragility. It's real, it's happening now. A lot of our shows that we do are with multiple guests. And one thing I love about it is that we're all twisting in the wind. So basically, it becomes a real galvanizing experience to have four people, three people and a host on a radio show. And I've seen this play out. There's a story I have of a guy who was the CEO of a company in our space, and I saw him at a conference. I introduced myself. He goes, "Oh, no, I know. I was on your show." He said, "This other person was on, that person was on. We talked about XYZ and all this stuff." And later on, I realized that show was like 8 years ago. And this guy
Mm.
remembers who was on the show, what we talked about. Like, that is a compelling storyline that's indelible because it's real, because it is frail, because it's not perfect. It's not photoshopped, for example, like the image that you talked about earlier. And we want to get closer to that, especially these days with all this AI slop that just people are just crying out everywhere. How do you stand out and you do it with reality? Well, this is really cool segment, folks. Don't touch it. That will be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio with Sharon Gai. That's Guy like AI, as she says, Gai. You have AI in your last name. I mean, that's a Matrix moment right there, right?
I swear I didn't change it in 2022. I promise. I was literally born with
That's too
it.
funny. That's yeah. I
Mm.
I have a theory that the Matrix is real.
Wow.
It's not actually a movie. In fact, in the actual Matrix, the movie The Matrix was pretty controversial because they're like, wait a minute, you're going to tip our hand. They said, no, well, Keanu Reeves saved the day. No one will believe that. And said, oh, okay, and they let it go. I'm just joking, obviously, but you do see it in the names of things, and like the names of people, like Bernie Madoff. Remember Bernie Madoff? He's the guy.
Wow,
He
it's the name I
founded.
haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, he founded the Nasdaq, and then he winds up running a Ponzi scheme, and like he literally made off with the money. I'm like, come on, man, you
Mhm.
don't even pronounce it Madoff,
Um,
Madoff. Like, come on, that's a programmer's joke, right? Deep in the Matrix.
Yeah, no, that's like also the importance of names. I feel like it's very important what you name your kids because
Sure,
they become what you name them.
that's right.
Yeah, there's a massive impact
Yes, that's
of when we
nomenclature. I believe
no,
that.
yeah, when we name something, you're already giving it meaning.
That's right. You're kind of shaping, and that's why you kind of see this, like the Karen has come along, right? Karen has come along as a name that, oh, someone who's complaining about things, or yeah, I could go down a whole wormhole on that front. But you're right, 'cause well, this gets into quantum too when they talk about how, when you actually see it, it changes or whatever. And that's kind of like life, when you're in a conversation. So let's get back to the live streaming stuff. When you're interacting with the person on the show, like texting him or whatever, and they're responding to you, that's a very kinetic part of the conversation, right? And that's interesting because now I'm not just a passive listener to this show. I can actually participate. And I think when you have that kind of dynamic, it is more interesting because it's personal. Now it's like I'm engaged in this process. I'm not just a third party viewer, I'm an interlocutor. But what do you think?
So I do a lot of speaking and I go to conferences a lot. And the one thing I make sure to do is when I'm keynoting to not be like a one to many relationship where it's just me talking and it's everyone else receiving, because I think those experiences kind of suck. Or those like we are like we've had too much of that.
Right.
Um yeah, but like because it's always more interesting when you're the one that's been asked the question. Now, like, do you know the answer? Do you not know the answer? Like that moment of thinking of the answer or crafting it or crystallizing it, like that's what's very engaging about it.
Mm-hmm.
And going to the live streaming thing, I think that's what made it take off, is because of that interactivity portion.
Hmm.
Um, I think we can only go so far. I think that's why, schools really needs to change the way that things are taught, because
Wow. Right.
whether it's primary school, high school, it was a one to many relation. Like,
Right.
why did we zone out in school? It's like, how do you get students to be engaged and listening? Like, they have to be actively, like, they have to put their hand in doing something.
Right.
If we're always, doing the passive listening part, it's very easy to lose people.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I think that's very prescient of you and very incisive because the entire model of school is just horribly broken now, in part because of ChatGPT. So, I actually there's a guy I've listened to give some speeches, pretty thought-provoking guy, Jordan Peterson. He actually went
Oh
back and
yeah, I
did
know
some
him.
research. Yeah, he did some research on where this whole Western education system came from, and he actually traced it back to like 1500s Prussia, I want to say. And what's interesting is that the objective, the design point of that system was to create dutiful little servants who will do as they're told. Right. So that
Hmm.
was the goal, was like we need to train these little mini bots that are human beings to just be obedient and to do what they're told. Well, okay. But is that really good for them? Is it really good for young children to just be told to do what they're told? Or do we want them to learn and to engage and interact in the world around us? And I would definitely lean towards the latter. Like we want to enable people to go and do things. So I think all of school has to fundamentally change, and that's going to be hard because there's a lot of resistance to change in that world because it's just how we've done things. But I think you bring up an excellent point. That whole story window is out the window. What do you think?
I write a chapter about the book, which is like, so if now has changed, where we're going to outsource a lot of the rote, mechanical, uncreative things to AI, and what we're left with as humans is the more strategic, human judgment needed, nuanced stuff, then how should our schools change to get us prepared? Because in that Prussian assembly line, like bodified version of education, you're producing people that are good at standardized tests,
Right,
that are dutifully servantful,
right,
that can take a command from a boss. And I come from Asia, which is even more so.
right,
Like, school over there is so much more about standardized tests and how did you do on the test and learning these very, structured things. And then you go to work and I mean, corporate life is generally kind of more this more or less the same.
right.
But yeah, like what generation can we produce if they didn't go through that assembly line
Right,
way of learning something?
right.
If they were allowed to think of the craziest, most unimaginable thing and let's go and build it.
Hmm.
Um, and then learn things as you need to build whatever you wanted to build. What if
Hmm.
school was like this? So there's two examples in terms of schooling that I have seen that's, I think, is the future. One's called in Austin, there's a school called Alpha School,
Hmm.
that there's no teachers, or there's no, so that in the traditional sense, it's all kids given an iPad, which serves as their AI tutor, and they all go on their own learning pace.
Hmm.
If they have a question that they really can't solve, if they really need some sort of human to come in and help them, they raise their hand, and a teacher-like person, more like a facilitator, comes in and guides them through that question. In China, there's an equivalent school. There are these tutoring centers that's started by this company called Swirl AI. It's the same concept, which is so standardized tests again is very big in China. And tutoring is also very big because all kids after school they go to more tutoring, and which goes back to the better scores. But in this new tutoring center, there's also no teachers. There's just kids that's learning themselves, and they all learn at their own pace. And you raise your hand when you want more
Hmm.
attention.
Right.
I think that's probably like it sounds weird, sounds funny, but I think that is the future. That's the right way of teaching.
I think so
Is
too. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and so I'll throw another potential curveball at you. The other thing I see happening here, it's part and parcel to this conversation, is that the employer-employee paradigm is falling apart, or at least in the scale. So historically, if you had a big company, you had lots and lots of people, what they call headcount. I really don't like when they say that headcount, or even the term human resources, I think is demeaning. It's like, what are you talking about? We're people, we're all individuals. Don't refer to me as a resource, like I'm a bot or
Mhm.
something. I think personally, I think HR is out the window. I think HR is going to be just, rules, business rules, and things that are you have to pay attention to. But I do think that the employer-employee construct is breaking down, and you're going to have much smaller, more nimble companies, which is going to be better anyway, because a whole lot is lost in traditional hierarchies from the top down, and there's all kind of nonsense that happens, all the tension between the different layers. There's just all kind of trouble that happens in the standard corporate world that I think is going to go out the window in this new world where I think people will be better equipped if we have this new kind of education. But what do you think?
Yeah, and I think that, the layers of approval, that thing, that's like when two departments get kind of political, and then the heads of
Right,
the department is like, oh, this is kind of my scope, and then that one's kind of like that adds to the BS that we didn't want to deal with at work.
right.
Stepping on each other's toes, and like
People
I
getting
think that's
offended. Right.
yeah, I think that's part of that work that really we didn't need to do. So in SF at least, there's a new metric for a lot of companies. It's revenue per head.
Hmm.
Like instead of boasting about how large your company is and how many people and employees, it's the opposite, which is smaller is better, or
Hmm.
smaller is more efficient. And so you would rather have $100 million company with only about 10 or 20 people running it versus $100 million company with 100 or 1,000 people running it, because there's just so much more complexity when you have more headcount,
Right.
as you said. And
Right.
then you need to have the more complicated HR to come in to manage all these people.
Which is always there's always such tension between HR. Like my buddy Madsen says, HR works for corporate, right? Like ostensibly they work for you, but they don't work for you. They work for corporate as a sort of cudgel between corporate and you, and that's no fun. Like who wants that? Like nobody wants that. Well, what did Mark say just today? He talked how funny it is that HR they want assessments, so the managers have to do assessments of all their direct reports. And he said no one wants to do assessments, and no one wants to be assessed. So it's like, what are you even really doing here? And I happen to know someone who's in the corporate world, and their rule. This is a big corporation too. It's a big healthcare corporation. Their rule is that whatever your assessments are on a scale of like 1 to 5, it has to average out to 3.1. All
Before
right.
you're axed or
Yeah,
something.
well, no, like as the manager, you're doing 10 people, and the score of all those 10 people has to come out to average of 3.1. So it's like, what?
Mm.
Like it's a constraint. I mean, I get it. Microsoft, I think, has a similar kind of thing where they decimate every so often, like you have to fire one person on your team or something, and it's
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, we did that.
that's draconian, man. That's like from way back in the day, like back thousands of years ago in the BC that you talked about earlier.
Mm.
So, I mean, a lot of these things I think are going to come crashing down, but out of it, I think the Phoenix Rising will be agile, nimble, thoughtful, problem-solving people who build cool things and do cool stuff. Like that's my view, but what do you think?
I think it's just like a time where we have to rethink our lives, maybe, or just the way that we approach. Like, if you look at like an average person and how many hours we spend at work, I think I read a stat where we actually spend a lot more time with our colleagues than our spouses.
Hmm.
And if you have a working life of a couple of decades, that's the number of years you're multiplying with how much time you give to an organization versus with your family. And so, if you are spending so much time with that organization, like you better spend it in a smarter way instead of the
Hmm.
old way of doing
Hmm.
things. And I think that's ultimately what AI allows us to do. It's supposed to be freeing. And I think the so one metaphor I also use in the book is when photography was invented. So back in the day, we had portrait artists, like they would be
Yeah.
commissioned by these
Yeah.
high
Right.
noble society to draw me a portrait, and it would take hours, and you sit really still, and then we have this portrait. And then photography came in, and we snapped a picture and we got the same result and it looked kind of accurate. And so then what happened to all the portrait artists that
Right.
their old job was to draw very accurately you? Uh, what happened with that's when modern art took flight, it's when Cubism took flight, it's when
Mm.
Impressionism took like those people instead of like
Wow.
very finely putting in your wrinkles on your face went a whole different direction and just invented this new area of art that now permeates MoMAs and Mets or where whatever art museum that we go to now, and it just paved way to new mediums. So reflecting that on us, like if we outsourced all of the spreadsheet editing and PowerPoint slide editing, things that we do, like what else are we going to invent with that extra time? And what else can our brains now be opened up to think about? So I think there's a lot of newer things that's just not been, or that's not thought of yet and not invented
Right.
yet. But I think with this post AI age, we will.
I love that. I think that's a very, very good way to describe it. Well, folks, look this lovely lady up online, Sharon Gai, Gai. The book is called How to Do More with Less: Future Proofing Yourself in an AI-Driven Economy. That's some of the best advice that you can get these days because it's coming on fast and hard, and it's affecting a lot of people. But don't touch it. I'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio.